Hey, and welcome back to day 171 of Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and we are reading through the Bible every day for 1 year. So hence the name 365. And I'm using the 1 year chronological Bible reading plan, which you can find online at oneyearbibleonline.com. So you would go on there. They have a whole bunch of different reading plans. You would hit the chronological reading plan, which is historical from beginning to end to get the full picture. And then you would just download, it's a free reading plan. You would download that and then come along with me. Today is again, day 171. It is June 19th. And our reading today, it's actually a really short reading. Our reading is 2 Kings 12:17 through chapter 13. So 12:17 through 13, and then 2 Chronicles 24:23 through 27. And so it feels like it's just sort of a wrap up. We are in the time of Kings. And so we are at this point, a couple of hundred years after Solomon has died. David was king. Solomon, his son, was king. The kingship of David, the line of the descendants, is going to continue, but now the kingdom is split into two pieces, the northern and the southern kingdom. Northern kingdom is Israel, southern kingdom is Judah. So that's how you're going to hear everything referred to when you read it. So when you read something like the king of Israel, right? It's not the entire 12 tribes. It's just that northern kingdom. When we hear king of Judah, it's not just the tribe of Judah, but it's Judah, Benjamin, a whole bunch of other areas actually. So like people came down from Manasseh and Ephraim. And then of course, all the Levites, the Levitical priests. So that's how the kingdom is split up. Mostly what we're finding is down in the southern kingdom in Judah. It has been led, it's about 50-50, been led by good kings and bad kings. Israel has essentially all been led by bad kings. Jehu showed a little bit of promise. So out of all the kings that kind of were up in the northern kingdom, Jehu seemed to be one of the better ones, but he didn't really take away everything, right? Like, so they were still worshiping the calves, the golden calves that Jeroboam made. So here we are, and we're kind of coming to the end of a couple of reigns. So just to give you some names, because they're kind of probably getting confusing at this point. There are so many names, and these aren't normal common names that we hear all the time. So right now, Joash is the king of Judah, the southern kingdom. He's the son of Ahaziah, right? Joash is a good king until Jehoiada the priest dies. And then he turns really quickly from being a good king into doing evil in the sight of the Lord. Jehoash is going to be the king up in the northern tribe of Israel, and he is the son of Jehoahaz. So I hope we're getting those names. So it's Joash and Jehoash. I know it gets a little bit confusing. Okay, so here we go. We are June 19th, and we're going in 2 Kings 13. So starting out in the first verse, it says, in the 23rd year of Joash, son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, southern kingdom, Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, became king of Israel up in Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. So Jehoahaz, king up in Israel, he's reigning 17 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord by following the sins of Jeroboam and Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit, and he did not turn away from them. So verse 3, it says, so the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and for a long time he kept them under the power of Hazael, king of Aram, and Ben-Hadad, his son. So we see these kings sort of continue to take more territory and more area. We learned yesterday that Israel's losing some land, and Judah is gaining some land, and Aram is gaining some land, right? So they're getting all these places. So it says, then Jehoahaz sought the Lord's favor. So there was this like one time where he was like, oh, and he reached out to the Lord. Because again, I'm going to say they are Israelites. They know who their God is. God makes it very evident to them that he has chosen them as a people group. And so, and there are believers all over, because Elijah and Elisha both came from the northern kingdom. So there are people who follow the Lord up there, just not their king and not most of their people. So it says, then Jehoahaz sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord listened to him. For he saw how severely Aram was kind of like building on them, like Aram's kind of like beating them. And so the king reaches out to the Lord, and the Lord responds and answers. He provided a deliverer for Israel, but it didn't cause them to turn to the Lord. So obviously that's always the hope, is that, right, the Lord holds out that he's going to show you who he is, and then you're going to turn and seek him after that, right? Because he's shown himself to be evident, and he has shown himself to be good. And so you go, okay, oh yeah, that guy, the Lord just saved me from all those bad things, and so now I'm going to do the things that he wants me to do. But unfortunately, that's not what happens here. So it says the Israelites lived in their own homes as they had before, right? So they kind of gained their land back, but they didn't turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam. And then the Asherah pole remains. So they're no longer going to get what they want. So then it says, then nothing has been left of the army of Jehoahaz except 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. So he gave them a chance. They chose not to follow. And so he let Aram do what Aram was going to do. Moving down, it says, everything is written down, and then it says, Jehoahaz then rests with his ancestors in Samaria. Then his son, which is the name I gave you earlier, Jehoash, succeeds him as king. So now we've got Joash on the bottom, Jehoash on the top. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, became king of Israel in Samaria. He reigns 16 years. He does evil in the sight of the Lord. So we still don't have another good king in Israel. Moving down to 17, it says, about this time, Hazael, king of Aram, went up and attacked Gath and captured it. So he's kind of like capturing these areas, but then he turns to capture Jerusalem. So I hate this story, actually. So he goes up and and it's because like nobody is following the Lord. Like it's as an outsider, it's so frustrating to look at. And I want to be honest with you guys, like I'm an insider as well, right? So I'm an outsider looking in, and I can look at this land of Israel and I'm like, why wouldn't they follow the Lord? But I'm also an insider who consistently turns away from the Lord and towards sin. Like it's just, I don't want to do it on a consistent enough basis that the Lord is like, I've given you chances and you continue to not follow me, right? So I want to make sure that when I do these things and I turn away, that I have to turn back. And I say this, I feel like all the time, but this is why I'm so adamant about reading these things, because I can look at them and judge them, right? I can be like, these stupid Israelites, but forget my own life and how this resonates in the things that I do, right? And in the ways that I turn from the Lord. And then it doesn't teach me anything, right? And then even though the Lord has made himself evident in this book, right, I can go, just like he made himself evident to those people, for us, he's evident in his word, and I can ignore that. And I can go to him when I'm hurting and beg for his grace and forgiveness, and then I can turn around and forget him for years and years and years, right? So that's not what I want to do. I want to look at the Israelites, get frustrated, be understanding, and allow that to turn my behavior back to the Lord, right? So if, again, I know I try to be encouraging and challenging. If that is you, if you are listening at this moment and you're saying to yourself, I don't want to listen, but I want the gifts that he gives, like that's not enough. You have to turn towards him to follow him, right? Like they needed to follow him and they asked him for a gift. He gave him the gift. And then they said, thanks for that, buddy. I'll just keep doing what I want now. That's not what he's looking for. So he allows Aram to come in and kind of start chipping away at the kingdom. And then what happens next is so Aram's kind of like, they kind of conquered a little bit of areas of Israel. And then they decide they're going to come down to Judah, right? So kind of like everything I said comes back to this. So they decide they're going to come down to Judah. Well, instead of turning to the Lord, Joash instead takes all of their stuff out of the temple. Now, this is the way I see it, right? Someone else might see it in a different way, that maybe he did a good thing. But I'm going to say at this point, Jehoiada is dead. And so he's no longer following the Lord, right? So he takes everything out of the temple, all the gold and all of those things, and he gives it to Hazael to appease him so he won't come and battle them in Judah. And it does appease them, so they don't wind up going to war. In 2 Chronicles 24, it says in verse 24, although the Aramean army had come with only a few men, the Lord delivered into their hands a much larger army, because Judah had forsaken the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Judgment was executed on Joash. So this is in a deliberate response to the way in which Joash behaved. And by the way, adding on top of that, that the Bible if we all say, oh, the Bible is anti this and anti that, like, they don't neglect the stories where their people, right? Because these are God's chosen people. The Bible does not neglect the stories where these people turned away from him and wound up getting judgment because of it. So they don't consistently say everything was good and we always had everything, right? Like they recognize that there is a punishment when they are not honoring their Lord. And so that's why we have it in front of us. All right. So he winds up giving him, and then in the end it says, so Joash then eventually dies. So Joash does, this is like one of the stories that Joash does. And then it says his officials conspire against him because of all this. His officials conspire against him, and they assassinate him at Beth Milo on the road, and his son winds up reigning. And so I want to say, because there's a little bit of difference here, a little bit of extra here in Second Chronicles. So Second Chronicles 24, it says, when the Arameans withdrew, they left Joash wounded. So at this point, Joash is wounded, and then his officials conspire against him, and they conspire against him for murdering Zechariah. So if you guys remember that story where they murdered Zechariah, Jehoiada's son, who came out and prophesied against them and was like, you guys need to turn back to the Lord, and they wound up killing him. Joash wound up killing him. And so now the officials are sort of like the land of Judah follows the Lord more than the land of Israel does. And it seems like they clean their plate a little bit more than Israel does. They clean house, so to speak. And so they're coming in once again, and it looks like they're trying to clean house. So they conspire against him for murdering the son of Jehoiada the priest, and they kill him in his bed. He died and was buried in the city of David. And then those who conspired against him, they have a list of people. So what's interesting is that it is Moabites and Ammonites. So it really is more of the enemy that are conspiring against him than his people. But then it says that Amaziah, his son, succeeds him as king. So now we get this story. This is actually our last story today. It's a really short reading. So because tomorrow was a huge reading, so it should be fun. Now we get into the story of Elisha. Elisha is that prophet in Israel who has done so many miracles, and we actually see one more miracle when he dies. He does all of these miracles. He's one of the ones that's chosen by the Lord, and we know that because the Lord confirms when he sees Elijah being drawn up into the heavens with like the chariots of fire. So here we go. This is, for me, a little bit more of an important story. So Elisha had been suffering from illness. And so so he's suffering, he's getting old. And before he dies, he calls Jehoash to him. So Jehoash, the king of Israel, comes to him and he weeps for him. And then Elisha says, get some bows and some arrows. And so he has them do this miraculous thing. So get a bow and arrow, and he shoots it out the east window. And Elisha then prophesies victory over the Arameans, right? So over Aram. And then he says, then take your arrows and shoot them at the ground. And so, and that's kind of like all the description he gives. And so the king then takes the arrows, he shoots them to the ground, but he only shoots 3. And Elisha is frustrated, and he's like, if you had shot 5 or 6, you would have completely destroyed them. But you only shot 3. So you're going to win 3 battles. So it says he struck 3 times and then stopped. And then Elisha died and was buried. So that's the last prophecy that we get from Elisha. But then we get the story about Elisha when he's dead. So he's dead. He's in the ground. And then there's this war. It says Moabite raiders used to enter the country every spring. They were burying this man, and then suddenly a band of raiders threw that guy into Elisha's tomb, and then the guy came back to life. So through the miracle of touching Elisha's bones, he actually sprang back to life and was walking around again. So then in verse 22 it says, Hazael, king of Aram, oppressed Israel throughout the reign of Jehoahaz. But the Lord was gracious to them and had compassion and showed concern for them because of his covenant way back in Genesis with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So God did not forget his people, right? He doesn't let his people be completely destroyed, right? There's no mass genocide where his people are completely destroyed. And then it says, to this day, he is unwilling to destroy them or banish them from his presence. Even when, and this is why God is good, right? So yes, God punishes, right? Because he's a just God. This is why we know that he's a good God. Because when those who turn from him, he punishes them. But when they turn back, and he gives them the opportunities to turn back, he rewards them because they're supposed to be with him, because he chose them out of all the people that have existed in the world. He chose this group to dwell with those people. Like, I don't know if we can comprehend how great that is, right? Like, I'm somebody who comes generations and generations later. I have no Israelite blood in me. So I'm one of those that's kind of like added in, right? Like, I'm one of the extras that gets the benefit. But these are the ones that he picked and he chose for eternity to be his representation on earth. And they just throw it away, right? And again, going back to what I said earlier, like, are you throwing away your representation of Jesus here on this earth, right? Do you recognize the importance of what it means to be his representative here on earth? And I'm going to say that as a people group, they forgot. And but yet the Lord stayed with them, because he says, I remember Abraham, I remember Isaac, I remember Jacob, and I made a promise to them. And so even though they are not a good representation in me, my promise will hold and my promise will stand with my people. All right, so then we're going to move on, just this tiny little blurb at the end where we find out about this prophecy that came true that Elisha gave to Jehoash. Hazael, king of Aram, died. Ben-Hadad, his son, succeeded him as king. Then Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, recaptured Ben-Hadad, and he did it 3 times. So 3 times Jehoash defeated him, and so he recovered the Israelite towns. So just as Elisha prophesied through that prophecy that he did, he won 3 battles. He regained some of his territory back from Aram, and that's where we're ending today. So that's our finish, which is great. A nice short video for you guys. If you were blessed by this, if you learned anything, if it helped you at all, if it's convicting to you or exciting to you in any way, I want you to like it. I want you to share it. I want you to subscribe to the channel, you guys. Get this out there. Get other people reading. We need more representation of the Lord in our world as it is today. So in the meantime, keep reading your Bible and come back tomorrow. See you next time.